is happening, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. Today we are taking a little cruise in the E36 M3, and we're bringing up the question of what is your favorite M car? It's always interesting to me because so many different people in the community prefer so many different types of cars and types of M cars. This E36 M3 became easily one of my favorite cars that I've ever owned. Probably the favorite because of the amount of time that I put into rehabilitating this car and kind of bringing it back from like the dead. It was in really rough shape when I bought it and spent a lot of time to get it to the point where it's at now. And it drives so good. We just have to do the transmission and the clutch, and this thing's gonna be like freaking money. But it's always interesting to me because so many different people in the community prefer so many different types of cars and M cars, and I often wonder why. Like, what is it about that specific model, whether it's like the M2 or the F80 M3 or the M4 or the E46 M3 or the E36 M3 or even the E30 M3, or maybe you drive an M5 or an M6. These are all such different cars. They're dramatically different in their own ways. I remember when I first got into my E90 M3 and I was coming out of an F30, and I realized almost immediately why people buy M cars, because of the way that they handle. I have been pretty used to driving an F30, and those cars, while they do handle great and they have the tech and all of that stuff and they are pretty quick, the car was just kind of lacking that stability, that suspension, that handling that these M cars have, just straight from the factory. Now, my E36 M3 has KW V3 coilovers on it. It handles really, really good, but when I bought my E90 M3, obviously, you know, that car was completely stock, and just getting in that car completely stock from like a pretty heavily modified F30, the E90 pretty much blew my mind and easily became one of my favorite cars. If I could say that I regret selling any one of my cars, it would probably be the E90 M3. However, that wasn't like the ideal spec that I would have liked to own. The ideal spec probably would have been a manual E90 M3 or E92 M3. It still was such a fantastic car to own at some point in life because of the way that that car sounded, the way that it handled, and the way that it looked. I think that the E90 M3s look absolutely incredible. I often find myself on Auto Trader, Facebook Marketplace, still kind of looking for an E90 or an E92 M3 just because I do love them. But this E36 M3, for the age of the car and the styling, easily one of my favorite cars, if not the favorite that I've ever owned. There's just something about the boxier looking cars before they got too rounded that I really, really enjoy. And I guess I'm just like a little bit old school when it comes to like design. I like the boxy look on cars, and I felt like the body lines on the E36 M3 are some of the best, if not the best. It's also interesting to me because, you know, I find people who are of all ages that really do like this car a lot. So that tells me that even like the younger generations that are coming up now that are going to be like new enthusiasts, they still have that old school sense of style and design. So I was really curious to see, you know, who preferred what the most and why. And so that's what I ask you today. Which M model car is like your dream car? Which one would it be? Where do you fall and why? What about that car speaks to you? Is it the design, the way that it looks, the way that it handles, the power? Now, as we know, like this car probably only makes 200 and some horsepower. It's not fast at all, but there's just something about this car when you're driving it, you feel so good. You feel so connected to the car. And I felt the same way about the E90 M3, if I'm being honest. I also do think that the E90s and the E92s are a timeless design. I feel like if you didn't know a lot about BMWs and like which years were which chassis or whatever, you would still think that the E90 M3 or the E92 M3 was like a newer car. The E36 M3s, if you look at them and you don't know much about cars or BMWs, you can just tell it's an older car. It looks like a 90s car. But I always felt like the E90s and the E92s just kind of blended in with a lot of the newer cars. I think BMW was sort of ahead of the game when they designed those cars. Not to mention the V8. I mean, like the V8 in that car, the S65, is easily one of the most beautiful sounding engines that we have in a BMW. Obviously the S85, the V10 would be even more eargasmic, but the S65 I think is something that a lot of people go after because those cars are also relatively affordable. Now, as we know, today's market is ridiculous and it's hard to get into anything that isn't marked up. But the E92s, the E90s, you know, they're hovering around the 30,000 mark for a decent one with not like insanely high mileage. If you wanted to get a low mileage E90 or E92, you're definitely climbing towards the 40s. But I think 30,000 for a car like that, if you can find one that has, you know, the rod bearings done, the actuators, has been pretty well maintained, is still a pretty good value for that car. Now, when I sold my E90 M3, it was actually right at the beginning of the pandemic, and I ended up selling that car for $25K. The car had 75,000 miles on it. The exterior was in mint condition. It had a few aftermarket parts on it, but nothing crazy. And the rod bearings and throttle actuators were done. I mean, it was like a really, really good car. But at that time, the market wasn't as crazy as it is now. So to be fair, $25,000 is what I paid for the car. So I bought that car for $25K. I drove it for, I don't know what it was, like 8 months or something. Did my thing to it, and then I ended up selling it again for $25K. Part of that reason was because I had gotten into the M2 and I had planned on making a little more content on that, really diving in deep into that platform. And when COVID hit, there was a lot of uncertainty. People didn't really know what was going to happen to their jobs, their livelihoods. At the time, for me personally, I couldn't have multiple cars. It just didn't make sense. It wasn't sustainable. And so I ended up deciding to get rid of the E90 M3. But I will say, to this day, that's probably one of the only cars that I honestly regret selling. The M2, you know, as I've said in other videos, it was a great car, but it's a newer car and they're kind of easy to get. They're not difficult to get like an N55 M2. There is an abundance of them. Granted, you know, when I bought mine, it was like 30,000 or something like that. I think they're probably going for a little bit more now. Now, still a fantastic car, loved it completely, but there was just something special about the E90 M3. There was just something that I loved a little bit more about the E90 M3. And so I told myself when I sold the E90 M3, I'm going to get an E92 M3 at some point because I wanted to try that engine and that chassis out in a coupe, and I wanted to do it again with the S65 because I just think it's such a fun engine to have, such a cool platform to own. As far as handling goes, this car handles better than any car I've ever owned. I think that has a lot to do just with the nature of the actual car, and then of course putting on the KWV2s, some better tires, some better brakes. I mean, this car in general is set up really, really well for like a street/track car. But if I had done the E90 or E92 again, it would have been an E92. It probably would have been white or Interlagos. It would have had a carbon rooftop. It would have been manual. Those were a few things that I really felt like I kind of missed on the E90 platform when I had gotten into it. And so I always told myself, we're going to try this again someday, but we're going to try it with the E92, and it's got to be manual because I really did enjoy that car in DCT, but it just wasn't that enjoyable to drive like around town, being that the DCT is such a like clunky transmission, especially in that older generation. I felt like manual would have been the way to own that car. And now that I've had a little more experience with having some of these older BMWs in manual, I just wish I could have gotten the opportunity to own one of those in manual. And so, yeah, you know, I continually find myself looking around, just kind of like checking on prices and seeing what's out there. I'm not going to say that I'm going to buy one, you know, within the next couple months, but I would like to own one again in the future. I think when it comes to like modification content and building the cars, I don't think that platform does really that well, to be honest. But I think that a car like that would just be like more for me to have, me to own, and me to enjoy. Kind of like the E36, like if I'm being honest, the E36 content is kind of up and down. It's not the greatest. It does okay sometimes. I think without question, the F-Series content in general does the best. I think that that content attracts the most amount of people. The numbers are there, like every time we make, you know, F87 M2 videos, if we do F30 videos, they always do really good, which is interesting from like a content creator perspective. You know, if you're like looking to get into this game, the F-Series, the F chassis is like a sweet spot. Affordable for one, it's affordable for most people to get into it. And I think that that's why a lot of people like that content, because it's somewhat relatable. If you go into like the M series, everything with the M cars is going to be a little bit more expensive. All of the parts, all of the upgrades. Now obviously the F87 M2, a little bit more expensive, but still a fantastic car for the value. Now we move into like something like the S55 and the F80 M3 and F82 M4 platform. Like those cars are absolutely insane and you can make a ton of power. But with that comes a lot of money. They are expensive to maintain, they are expensive to buy, they are expensive to modify. It's not cheap owning an F80 M3 and building it up like the way that I would typically on my channel. With this E36 M3, I got very lucky. At least in my opinion, I think I got very lucky. I found this car at a car show for $5,000. I made $5,000 for this E36 M3. Now granted, it was in very, very rough shape. I hardly even made it home when I bought it. It was pretty much undrivable. The exterior was completely trashed. It took a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort to get it to this point. Just something about rowing the gears in an older car like this that it just feels good. And it's something that I feel like everyone needs to experience at some point in their life. I love the way that the S52 sounds in this car. I think it is such a good sounding engine, which is one of the things with the S55s. You know, it's like everyone is searching for a way to make that car just sound better, you know? And these cars just sound amazing right out of the gate. And I don't know what it is, man. I just really love the body shape on this car. Like the classic, boxier looking shape. I don't know. I just really, really dig it. Something about the E36 body always gets me. They're so good. They're so like well proportioned. They're not too big. And I love the like hard edges all over the place. Like it's just, I don't know, man, something about this car just makes me feel a certain way. It's always interesting to me because So many people in this BMW community have such strong opinions about which M car is the best car and which one you have to own, but obviously none of us are the same. So I'm always curious as to like, why do you like that certain model? What is it about that certain model that aligns with you? Are you like a go fast guy? Do you like the corners? Do you like the straights? Do you like the classic body styles? Do you like the more rounded off modern styles? Something with like the newer M cars, they just don't really resonate that much with me. I think they're beautiful cars and there's obviously like an audience out there for them, but something about them just doesn't quite get me as excited as like an older M car. And I think that that viewpoint is very split. I think that some people just really love the new ones and some people really love the older ones. And most people are very passionate about that decision. But I think that when you get into more and more M cars, you kind of find yourself wanting some of the older models just to own and experience at some point in your life. With that being said, I'd also like to own an F80 M3 at some point in my life. I have yet to experience the S55 platform, so I really can't like speak on that platform, but without question, they're absolute monsters. Like, they make really, really good power. They're fast right out of the gate. They're wide, they're stable, they handle good. And I think that if you get one in manual, it's gonna be enough excitement for you. But even when I went out and drove like the G80 M3, it's a very nice car, but it's also massive. Like, those cars are huge. It feels like you're driving like an M5, and it's a relatively numb experience. If you want more excitement, you're gonna sort of feel a bit disconnected from that car. And it just sort of felt boring to me. Granted, the car handled really, really good. It was futuristic. It had a beautiful interior. I thought they looked pretty good. I just kind of tried to envision myself owning that in my garage, and I couldn't see myself being very excited about driving that car every day. There's something about these older BMWs, these older M cars, that every time I open the garage and I see it, I just get like this wave of excitement and anticipation to drive it. For the E36 M3, I don't drive it all the time, so when I do get to drive it, it's a very special experience. A lot of people in the community just have different goals when it comes to buying a car. Some people just want like older BMWs to roll through the gears. Doesn't have to be fast, but they handle good. And then some people are just like drag racing, you know, they want like a super fast straight line speed BMW M car, or just BMW in general. And there are so many different options when it comes to that, as we know. S55s, B58s, even the SUPRA B58s, M340s, the Gen 2 B58s, and then of course like the newer S58s, which are proving to be absolute monster platforms. I also think that it's crazy now that we are getting into like sport compact SUVs that handle like cars and perform like cars. Like the X3 M is an absolute monster of a vehicle. You could have an SUV and literally it will handle like a car, it will feel like you're driving a car, and it makes power like a fast BMW M car. So anyways, you guys, I just wanted to spark some interest in this topic and see what you guys enjoyed the most, and which model platform you preferred and why. But anyways, you guys, we got some more content coming up with the E36 M3 and then the new engine for the 340, which is an M240 engine with, I found out it has 277 miles on that engine that I bought. It shipped yesterday, so it should be here hopefully by the end of the week. Our plan is to have that thing back up and running before the holidays. We'll see if we can make that happen. It would be nice. And then also the engine that we are pulling out, we are of course going to be building, so that thing can be making a ton of power. Now the platform that I will be putting that car into, I have decided what I am gonna put it into. It's gonna be the biggest project that I've ever done on the channel. And when I say like a build, this will be like a proper build. I'm really excited about that build. The 340 will still be sick as hell. We're obviously gonna do some more power mods once we break in that engine. Literally, it's 277 miles on the engine, dude. I gotta break that thing in first before we go too crazy. But this new project that we're going to be starting probably within the next few months, after we get through like the whole build phase of building the old engine, is going to be mental. And if you think you know, comment down below, but I can pretty much guarantee you that like nobody is gonna guess what this is because no one's expecting it. And you guys will see what I'm gonna do, but it's going to be very unique and it's gonna be very fun. Anyways, guys, I appreciate you as always. Feel free to grab some merch at the link below, support your boy. But thank you guys so much for watching the channel. I love you. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.